Iran before the revolution. By the early 1972s, the Pahlavi monarchy in Iran appeared to occupy a position of remarkable strength. Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi presided over a nation transformed by oil wealth, armed with one of the most formidable militaries in the Middle East, and aligned firmly with the Western powers in the Cold War struggle against Soviet influence. Yet beneath this facade of stability, powerful forces were gathering that would, within a decade, sweep away the monarchy entirely and fundamentally reshape the political landscape of the Middle East. The roots of the Iranian Revolution cannot be understood without examining the events of 1953. In that year, the United States Central Intelligence Agency and British intelligence services orchestrated a coup against Prime Minister Mohammad Mosaddegh, whose government had nationalized Iran's oil industry. The coup restored Shah Pahlavi to full authority after he had briefly fled the country. From that moment forward, the Shah's legitimacy, in the eyes of many Iranians, became inextricably linked to foreign intervention. The monarchy survived, but it survived as an institution dependent upon external support rather than organic domestic consensus. Following the coup, Iran became a cornerstone of American strategy in the Middle East. The United States provided substantial military assistance, technical advisors, and diplomatic backing. In return, Iran served as a bulwark against Soviet expansion southward toward the Persian Gulf oil fields and as a reliable supplier of petroleum to Western markets. This relationship would prove both the Shah's greatest asset and, ultimately, one of his most significant vulnerabilities. The Shah embarked upon an ambitious program of modernization known as the White Revolution. Launched in 1963, the reforms encompassed land redistribution, literacy campaigns, women's suffrage, and industrialization. Oil revenues funded these initiatives, and when Iran refused to participate in the Arab oil embargo following the 1973 Arab-Israeli War, petroleum sales increased by an extraordinary 670%. By the mid-1970s, literacy rates had doubled to approximately 32% of the population. A growing middle class of professionals, civil servants, and small business owners emerged in Iran's expanding cities. Women gained the right to vote and access to education previously denied them. Yet modernization came at considerable cost. Saudi Arabia's King Faisal reportedly warned the Shah with prescient concern. "Your Majesty, I appreciate your advice. May I remind you, you are not the Shah of France. You are not in the Élysée. You are in Iran. Your population is 90% Muslim. Please, don't forget that." The Shah, however, proved unwilling or unable to heed such counsel, appointing ministers chosen primarily for their loyalty rather than their competence or independence of judgment. Political parties were banned. In 1975, all adult men were compelled to join the Shah's Rastaki's party, transforming Iran into a one-party state in all but name. The secret police, known as Savak, conducted surveillance, arrested dissidents, and employed torture against those suspected of opposing the regime. Underground political movements, including the Secular National Front and the Communist Today Party, operated in constant fear of infiltration and arrest. The geography of discontent. The Shah's reforms produced sharply uneven results across Iranian society. The urban, educated middle class benefited substantially from modernization. They gained access to consumer goods, professional opportunities, and a standard of living that approximated Western norms. Yet large segments of the population experienced modernization as disruption rather than progress. rural Iranians migrated to cities in search of employment, only to discover that the promises of prosperity frequently proved illusory. They found themselves in sprawling slums on the periphery of Tehran and other major cities, disconnected from traditional village life, yet unable to fully participate in the urban economy. One villager from Aliabad articulated the frustrations shared by many. "We have nothing in this country. We see that others are rich and have 7- or 8-story homes, and we live in tents. It takes us 1 or 2 months to get something done in government offices, and the other side had good connections and is able to ruin us. If they attack us and fight us and we go to court, the court does nothing because they are in cahoots with them." Opposition to the Shah coalesced among several distinct groups, each motivated by different grievances, yet united in their rejection of the existing order. Leftist intellectuals, many educated in Europe or the United States, opposed what they characterized as royal absolutism and American imperialism. Some joined the established opposition parties, others gravitated toward more radical organizations. The Fedayeen-e-Khalq adopted Marxist-Leninist ideology and conducted armed attacks against regime targets. The Mujahideen-e-Khalq combined Islamic themes with Marxist analysis in a synthesis that attracted young militants willing to risk their lives against the monarchy. The religious opposition. The most consequential opposition, however, emerged from the religious establishment. Iran's Shia clerical hierarchy occupied a unique position in Iranian society. Unlike the secular opposition movements, the clergy possessed an institutional base that the regime could not easily suppress. Mosques provided spaces for gathering and communication beyond the reach of Savak surveillance. Religious observances offered occasions for veiled political commentary. The tradition of clerical independence from state authority provided legitimacy for dissent. Many clerics opposed the White Revolution's secularizing tendencies. They objected to family law reforms that altered traditional gender relations. They resented the displacement of religious law by civil codes derived from European models. They viewed Western cultural influence visible in clothing, entertainment, and social customs as a threat to Islamic values and Iranian identity. Khomeini's message resonated particularly among young Iranians caught between traditional religious backgrounds and modern education. One observer noted the generational and class dynamics at work. Those who are out in society more and go into Shiraz are for Khomeini, but the old men who haven't studied and don't go into the city much aren't. There is a difference between those whose level of thinking is lower, who are illiterate and haven't seen much of the situation, and those whose level of thinking is higher. The Ayatollah's appeal transcended simple religious conservatism. He articulated a vision that incorporated democratic republican ideals within an Islamic framework, promising governance that would be both authentically Iranian and genuinely responsive to popular will. This synthesis attracted supporters across the opposition spectrum, from devout traditionalists to secular nationalists, who saw in Khomeini a figure capable of unifying resistance to the Shah. The Year of Revolution, 1978. The revolutionary crisis began in January 1978, with protests in the holy city of Qom. Security forces responded with violence, killing several demonstrators. In accordance with Shia religious custom, mourning ceremonies were held 40 days later, ceremonies that themselves became occasions for protest and further violence. This 40-day cycle of mourning, protest, repression, and renewed mourning created a rhythm of escalation that the regime proved unable to break. The Shah appeared genuinely bewildered by the emerging opposition. His self-conception as a beloved modernizing monarch left him unprepared to comprehend the depth of resentment his policies had generated. American intelligence agencies proved equally surprised. Their assessments had consistently portrayed the Shah's position as stable, his military as loyal, and serious opposition as marginal. The United States possessed remarkably little information about Khomeini or the religious opposition more broadly. Throughout the spring and summer of 1000, the demonstrators attacked symbols of modernization and foreign influence banks, cinemas, liquor stores, and establishments associated with Western culture. On August 19, Islamic extremists set fire to the Cinema Rex in Abadan, killing between 370 and 470 people in one of the deadliest terrorist attacks in history to that point. Yet many Iranians blamed Savak for the atrocity. So thoroughly had the secret police become synonymous with regime brutality in the popular imagination. One student, Mohammad Amini, described clashes at a teachers' college that illustrated the regime's deteriorating position. The police took up positions and attacked us. We fought them with our rocks. A violent struggle broke out, but we weren't an equal match for them. We were forced to retreat. When we went back into the college yard, I noticed the dean was watching from his window and laughing. At that very moment, a student threw a rock at him. The window shattered. Black Friday and its aftermath. On the 7th of September, 1978, the Shah declared martial law in Tehran and 11 other cities. The decree banned public gatherings and imposed curfews. The following morning, September 8, thousands of protesters gathered in Jaleh Square in eastern Tehran. Many had likely not yet learned of the martial law declaration. Government troops opened fire on the crowd. Official figures acknowledged 68 killed and 205 wounded, though opposition sources claimed casualties as high as 5,000. The precise numbers matter less than the political consequences. Black Friday, as the massacre became known, shattered any remaining possibility of reconciliation between the regime and its opponents. The Shah had demonstrated his willingness to kill Iranians in large numbers. The opposition had demonstrated its willingness to accept such casualties. The weeks following Black Friday revealed deepening fractures within the regime itself. Ministers and commanders hesitated to enforce martial law consistently. Reports emerged of fraternization between soldiers and protesters. Most troops were conscripts from rural backgrounds. They proved receptive to opposition clerics who appealed to religious solidarity or threatened to excommunicate those who fired on fellow Muslims. Chief of Staff General Abbas Garibagi grew sufficiently concerned about military reliability that he addressed troops directly, attempting to shore up loyalty. The Shah, meanwhile, descended into indecision and apparent depression. Unbeknownst to all but his closest associates, he was suffering from the cancer that would eventually kill him. His judgment, never particularly acute in political matters, deteriorated further. He vacillated between reform and repression, implemented neither consistently, and watched his authority erode week by week. The consolidation of revolutionary power. The revolution's success, however, immediately raised the question that revolutions always raise. What would replace the old order? The coalition that had united against the Shah began fragmenting almost from the moment of victory. Khomeini moved shrewdly to consolidate power while maintaining the appearance of broad-based governance. He appointed Mehdi Bazargan, a moderate nationalist with technocratic credentials, as Prime Minister of a provisional government. This appointment reassured those who feared clerical domination, while leaving ultimate authority in Khomeini's hands. In March 1979, Khomeini ordered a referendum on a single question: should Iran be an Islamic republic? The reported result, 98.2% in favor, reflected both genuine popular support and the coercive atmosphere in which voting occurred. Observers noted irregularities, including color-coded ballots that revealed individual voters' choices. Yet the outcome was not simply manufactured. Many Iranians, including moderates and secularists, recognized the cleric's central role in organizing the revolution and accepted that the new order would have an Islamic character. Khomeini exploited the threat posed by armed leftist groups and residual monarchist elements to justify expanding clerical authority. Although his regime faced opposition, including assassinations by guerrilla organizations, he maintained a stable foundation among religious traditionalists while creating new institutions loyal to himself. Moderate figures like Bazargan found themselves increasingly sidelined, their attempts to normalize relations with the United States and other Western powers blocked by hardliners who saw anti-Americanism as essential to the revolution's identity. The hostage crisis. Events escalated dramatically in November 1979, transforming the Iranian Revolution from a regional upheaval into a global crisis. The Shah, now in exile and suffering from advanced cancer, requested permission to enter the United States for medical treatment. President Jimmy Carter faced pressure from prominent figures, including Henry Kissinger and David Rockefeller. The decision proved catastrophic. On the 4th of November, 1979, Iranian students stormed the American embassy in Tehran and seized 52 American diplomats and staff as hostages. Both sides initially expected a rapid resolution, similar to an earlier incident in February when militants had briefly occupied the embassy before the provisional government secured the Americans' release. The operation ended in disaster before reaching Tehran. 3 of the 8 helicopters assigned to the mission experienced mechanical failures in the Iranian desert. A 4th helicopter collided with a fuel tanker during refueling, causing an explosion that killed 8 American servicemen. The mission was aborted without any attempt to reach the embassy. Carter addressed the nation afterward, accepting responsibility. "It was my responsibility as president to launch this mission. It was my responsibility to terminate the mission when it ended. There is a deeper failure than that of incomplete success, and that is the failure to attempt a worthy effort, a failure to try." Negotiations between the Carter administration and the Iranian government continued through the transition period. Iran would release the hostages in exchange for an American pledge of non-interference in Iranian affairs and the unfreezing of Iranian assets, worth approximately $25 billion in contemporary value. The Iranians made no apparent concessions, though some analysts later suggested that Khomeini secretly agreed to permit Israeli arms sales to Iran's emerging adversary, Iraq. The timing of the hostages' release proved politically significant. They were freed on the 20th of January, 1981, precisely 20 minutes after Ronald Reagan completed his oath of office. They had been held for 444 days. The timing fueled persistent allegations, advanced by both Iranian and American officials, that the Reagan campaign had secretly encouraged Khomeini to delay the release until after Carter's defeat, thereby maximizing the political damage to the incumbent president. The road to war. The revolution's most immediate and devastating consequence, however, concerned Iran's relations with its neighbor Iraq. Saddam Hussein, who had consolidated power in Baghdad through the Ba'ath Party, initially maintained correct, if not warm, relations with revolutionary Iran. Iraq had hosted Khomeini during his years of exile, providing a base from which the Ayatollah could continue his agitation against the Shah. This relationship of convenience deteriorated rapidly after the revolution's triumph. More fundamentally, the revolution threatened to destabilize Iraq itself. The Shia majority in southern Iraq had historically been subordinated to the Sunni-dominated Ba'ath regime. Khomeini's rhetoric of Islamic revolution and Shia empowerment resonated dangerously among Iraqi Shia, while Iran began supporting Kurdish separatists in the north. Previous agreements between Iran and Iraq, which had resolved border disputes and established frameworks for managing their complex relationship, collapsed under the weight of revolutionary ideology. Saddam Hussein perceived both threat and opportunity. Threat from Iranian-supported subversion, opportunity from the apparent chaos and military weakness of the revolutionary regime. As Khomeini continued suppressing internal opponents throughout 1980, including the leftist groups that had helped bring him to power, he simultaneously faced a gathering external threat. Revolution was giving way to what some historians would later characterize as the 20th century's last total war. The Iran-Iraq War that erupted in September 1980 would last 8 years. It would see the use of chemical weapons on a scale not witnessed since World War I. It would draw in external powers, reshape regional alliances, and plant seeds of conflict that would germinate for decades afterward. But these consequences remained in the future. As 1980 drew to a close, the immediate reality was that a revolution born of diverse grievances and united by opposition to an autocratic monarch had produced a new form of autocracy. Theocratic rather than royal, Islamic rather than secular, but no less intolerant of dissent or alternative visions of Iranian society. The revolutionaries had succeeded in destroying the old order. What they built in its place would prove equally contentious, equally violent, and equally consequential for Iran and the world. The Iranian Revolution demonstrated that even the most formidable appearing regimes could collapse with stunning rapidity when the foundations of their legitimacy eroded. The Shah's military power, his secret police, his American backing, none of these proved sufficient. When broad segments of his population concluded that his rule was illegitimate, the revolution also demonstrated, however, that the unity forged in opposition rarely survives the achievement of power. The coalition that overthrew the Shah fractured almost immediately, and the most organized and ruthless faction, Khomeini's clerical network, emerged dominant. These lessons would resonate throughout the subsequent decades, as other authoritarian regimes in the Middle East and beyond confronted their own crises of legitimacy, and as revolutionary movements elsewhere discovered that seizing power was only the beginning of their struggle.